talking about some of the new rule changes in place. We were just talking a second ago about how now, like, the MLB is adopting some of the rule changes that you guys have had for a few years now.
Yeah, pretty much. Most of the rule changes that are now at the major league level started in the Atlantic League. We test them. That's part of our job. This league is a partner league. We test rules for Major League Baseball. And while everybody may shrug their shoulders at something we're doing here, be careful what you shrug your shoulders at, because in a few years it may be in Major League Baseball. So it's the beauty of this league. It serves as a testing platform for Major League Baseball.
And have you guys had any feedback from players and coaches about certain rules or certain changes in place?
I think there's certain rules that we've tried over the years that haven't worked, and I think Major League Baseball takes that feedback that players give and evaluate it. In 21, we moved the mound back a foot for half the season to see how it would affect hitting if there'd be more offense, and Major League Baseball determined it really didn't make a difference, so that kind of died. But some of the other things we've had, they test the rule here, and then I think they modify it and tweak it a little bit when it gets to the major league level or the high AAA level or something like that.
Yeah, I know one of the rule changes that the MLB is adapting this year that you guys have had previously is the bigger bases.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's supposed to cut down on, like, player injuries, something along those lines.
There's a little bit of cutting down on player injuries, also creating a little more offense on the bases. They want guys to have it to be, better chances of stealing a base, and you don't think about it that it's just adding a couple inches per base, but when you're talking about a game of seconds and tenths of seconds and a game of inches, it does make a difference.
Yeah, and I noticed that a big talker, I guess, of just the off season for baseball is the pitching clock, and now you guys are going to be introducing that this year as well. What are your kind of thoughts on that?
The pitch clock, the whole reason for the pitch clock was to increase the pace of play and cut down on the game times a little bit. They showed it in spring training that it does that. I think they're still working out the tweaks. I think the rules you see now may be modified as we go along this year, next year, so on. And the Atlantic League will be instituting a pitch clock, and the rules will be a little bit different. The timing will be a little bit different than Major League Baseball, but that's also a test too to see how that timing works versus what Major League Baseball is currently doing.
And what have you guys started to use that kind of in practice just yet?
We have not. We're still waiting to get ours installed. We'll have them installed second week of April, and then the league will probably have a grace period so players can get used to it, where it won't be as many violations as it will be warnings, and then it'll be switched over to no more warnings, it's just violations. So a few other rules we're putting into play in this league. We're working on a designated runner rule. We have we're working on a modification of the number of disengagements a pitcher can have from the mound during an at-bat. Some different things like that. So the rules continue to be tested in this league as we go forward.
And do you think that that's something that players and even the personnel enjoy? Is having the different rule changes?
I think there's some rules that they don't mind because those rules don't really affect the way they play the game. But then there are other ones that it affects players differently. We had automated balls and strikes a couple years ago. There were certain players who could not pitch to a box, and it just changed the way they threw. And you had other guys who loved it because there was a consistency. Once you developed that zone was consistent. And now the automated balls and strikes will be in AAA this year. It was here a few years ago. People weren't sure if it was real baseball, and now it's going to be at the AAA level. So I think that's probably something on tap for Major League Baseball down the road.
And just out of curiosity, I guess, looking at some of the rules that have been put in place that have changed the game a little bit, what do you think is the most important? Or the biggest change?
I think the biggest change is going to be the pitch clock because there's so much involved with it. You add bigger bases, doesn't affect everybody. You don't even notice it after a while. It's part of the woodwork. The pitch clock is going to probably be the biggest change because baseball has never had a clock, a true clock. There's always a guideline of how much time you have between innings and how long a mound visit should be and so on. But there's never been a clock that people have had to play to. And this is the first time that's happening. So I think that's going to be probably the biggest change. But like everything else, it doesn't change the game. You still got to put guys on base. You still got to drive them around. Pitcher still has to get them out. It just changes the way you do that a little bit more.
I know that there's another rule about the shift change, right? That they're not allowed to do that anymore. How do you think that that's going to affect the gameplay?
You know, I think it'll affect the hitters. Well, obviously, some of the guys who can't hit the other way will be back to where they probably were prior to the shift. We tested the no shift rule here over the past few years. But like any rule, I think teams, now the challenge is, how do you defend against not being able to shift? You come up with something new. So there's always, how do you beat the system? And I think that's what is going to be developed now, is teams are going to figure out how do we modify, how do we tweak this to our advantage, or to our, make it so it's not a disadvantage. So I think you're going to see that, but that one is going to give the hitters a chance to increase that offense a little bit for those guys who, when all the guys are on the right side of the infield, they just can't seem to hit to the left side, and it doesn't matter what they do, they're going to the same place. Baseball players are creatures of habit.
Right. All right. Well, I think that's pretty much all the questions I have for you today. Is there anything that I didn't ask that you'd like to mention?
Let's see. I think some of the other rules, the extra inning rule that Major League Baseball uses now, the guy on second started here. The 3-batter minimum for pitchers started here. The no pitch intentional walk started here. So I think it's important for people to know that this league, while it's a great place for guys to get a second chance at getting back to the big leagues or getting back to affiliated baseball, we're testing these rules that are going to have a major impact on the game across the board.